Happy Sunday. Hashtag my global family. This is Dre Abeita, coyote walking in this world, and a real life Athletic Pueblo superhero. Also, pastor of Coyotes Lodge, House of Spirituality, Critical Theory, and Medical Marijuana. Thank you for joining us for service this glorious Sunday. I am so excited to be here with you, family. And to be completely honest, I am still riding my ARA conference high. But hey, family, as you know, this coyote is always about working on our mind, body, and spirit so that we can be the superheroes that we need to lift up all of our communities. Additionally, family, don't forget the best thing about being part of this Coyotes online spiritual community is that we have service available here on Facebook at any time. So if you miss a service, no worries. You know I'm always on Indian time, but we have a backup. Additionally, family, I would like to remind you that Coyotes Lodge is a house of spirituality. We are not a religion-based faith, but rather we come together to celebrate life and to learn from our lived experiences. So instead of our readings coming from religious text, we actually use critical race theory, sociology, traditional Napi stories or coyote stories, and we embrace all of the multifaceted ways in which we are unique, diverse, and amazing. Additionally, family, we are also the House of Medical Marijuana. And that does not mean, family, that you yourself have to partake of this coyote's medicine, but rather we ask that you open your ears, your minds, and your hearts, and you think about embracing alternative ways of healing. If anything, family, COVID has taught me that we can seek all different alternative ways of taking care of ourselves during this global pandemic, because this is a form of trauma, historic trauma that has affected every community around the world. At this time, I would like to do a land acknowledgement before we start our opening prayer. Dear family, please join me in reflecting upon the ground of which you stand. And I would like for you to reflect on the lived experience of how coloniality, white supremacy, and capitalism continues to dehumanize us and affect all of our lives. I would like you to think and reflect upon the sacrifices and the actual blood that has been spilt, not only today, as our modern warriors around the world, our transgender communities, our communities of color, are under an onslaught of violence, family. So not only did our ancestors shed their blood on this land and fight so that we may have the ability to thrive and create change in 2021, but we also recognize the sacrifices that are being made today. Our opening prayer, family, is this coyote's version of making an offering to our ancestors while also blending modernity with that of our ancestors. So in this jar, I'm holding sage, which is sacred to my people. And there are cultures from all around the world that have some sort of ceremony that allows them to cleanse their spaces, their minds, their bodies, and their spirits. But family, we also live in 2021, which means that we are children of modernity. And so today I blend those two parts of ourselves and offer up our prayers to the ancestors and to those who are listening. And don't forget, family, that our ancestors, our loved ones, our family members, both blood and created, are never gone from us. All we have to do is raise our voices and say hello, and they listen. Also, try not to burn your house down. Dear Gammy, it's your favorite trickster coyote, your beloved granddaughter. I know I've been causing trouble again, but you know it's for a good cause, and it raises up the voices of students from around the world, and it's exactly what you trained me all of my life to do. Thank you, Gammy, for being the first warrior woman. Born in 1924, my Gammy provided for all of her children and ensured that they received higher education, that they would make their stamp on this world. And whether it was through her stern scolding, her loving care through food and chocolates and good times, or that big wooden spoon, I know that you had good intentions for me, Gammy. And I am so grateful for all the sacrifices that you made for our entire family so that we may enjoy privilege as leaders of today's communities. Hi, Papa. I miss you. My dear Papa, who was born in 1911. Andres Histia. Oh, Papa, I loved you so much. And although you adopted our family, you made us your own and you kept us together like glue. I learned how to be glue from you, Papa. And your little granddaughter grew up to be a big, strong tree. So thank you for showing me how to love by your amazing example. I miss you and I hope you're having a good time watching us. Please send us your blessings and maybe the tortilla recipe. I miss them so much. Dear great-great-grandpa Pablo Abeita, who was a true atleta, revolutionary and statesman and leader of our peoples, may you send strength to all of the leaders from around the world, regardless of race, ethnicity, class, language, or citizenship. And please imbue all of our leaders with the fortitude and strength and courage to lead with a moral compass, not a capitalist one. Thank you for showing our people that we could also be leaders in this colonial world. And to all of our aunties, uncles, cousins, gammies, and papas who have gone before us, please send us your blessings as you look down on your families as we survive and thrive in 2021. At this time, family, I'm going to take a ceremonial smoke of my medical marijuana. But do not forget, family, that this coyote is medicated 100% of the time that she's awake. Because my medical marijuana is not a drug to be criminalized, but rather a tool and a life-saving medication that allows me to be a spiritual leader, community organizer, and a voice for our people when we need it most. Family, this week's reading is coming from the same text as last week. So I have an edited version of Native American Testimony by Peter Nabokov. And this is a beloved text from my days as an NAS major at Dartmouth College. This coyote took 5 years to graduate, family, and got Parkhursted, which means kicked out after her sophomore year. But that's okay, family. It was part of my life's journey. And I went through the same experience that thousands of our Indigenous, marginalized communities of color, our youth face a hostile environment when they go off to get their education in institutions around the world. And I would like for our readings today be reflective of our past and a critical critique and look at our current. I've heard that modernity has brought us wonderful gifts, family, but in the same breath where my heart raises in hearing Biden's administration appointing a murdered woman and missing Indigenous woman task force, My heart also saddens, and I am filled with a quiet rage that such a policy, such an implementation, such a task force need be created, because our lives still are being taken. Our women are still being raped. And instead of a romanticized version of American manifest destiny, in which these white settlers have an open call on the wild, wild west, in which my people were the enemy and were hunted down and literally given bounties for our lives. In 2021, when we have mining camps and we have murdered Indigenous women who are being raped and abused in border towns in 2021, I ask you, how is that any different from the Wild West? How is the United States government protecting any of its people when our Black brothers and sisters are being shot in the streets or shot in their homes? I'm asking you, family, to think deeply and become enraged with me and use that to become a force on this world to say no longer will our people suffer. Every generation says, this is the one we make change. I grew up thriving on the idea that I was hope for my family, on the idea that the sacrifices they made, both to provide for my education and to provide me with love and care, because I was their hope, because I was going to break through the barriers that held our families down for generations. And I am here now as a witness to our continued pain. And I am here to tell you, family, to add your voice to mine, to shake the heavens, and to call down an accountability on these institutions that continue to hurt us, on these colleges and universities that continue to tell graduate students, sit down and sit at my feet and listen and do work for me and do research for me and write for me, but quiet. You are not yet a PhD. You sit there and you wait. And I am tired of waiting, family, or my peers in academia who go on to fulfill their dreams of becoming deans and becoming the leaders of all of our industries in America. But when they get their family, do they have power? Or must they compromise their moral selves? Must they give in to the capitalist overlords and systems of control that are keeping all of our people in subjugation in 2021? I ask you, is the wage that our brothers and sisters and non-binary siblings are making at Walmart, at Uber, at the university, in our dining halls, is $750 enough for a graduate research assistant who has 10 hours a week of work to pay for their family's needs? I ask you, family, how can a university spend millions of dollars on sports facilities and fancy condos to lure people from out of state to pay fancy tuition, while saying no to graduate student housing because $55 million is too much? I ask you, how much is $400,000 to bail out a coach? How much are we paying our deans when the president of the college makes $412,000 and a graduate student worker supporting their family at a full-time position with 20 hours, which is the legal limit, is making $1,500? How do you pay? How do you survive? And yet, how do you wait? Because we are constantly told, all you have to do is work hard. All you have to do is play by the rules, and someday your dreams will come true. And I'm asking you, family, when is that day? Our first reading is talking about the Dawes Allotment Act, in which they took our reservation land and they took our communities After the era of kill the Indian to save the man, and before that, the American government policy was just to kill the man. They asked us to be patient. They asked us to go to white men's schools. They asked us to learn their language and learn their religion, but they never embraced us as full community members. We were never meant to be American. We were meant to be the slaves. We were meant to be the nannies. We were meant to be the maids. We were meant to work in the fields, as many of our families do today, because we were not ever accepted on equal footing, family. And I'm asking you in 2021, how much more can our hearts, bodies, and minds take? How much longer are we going to allow them to abuse our people and keep saying, wait, your time will come? I'm asking you, when will it come? If it didn't come in 1912, for my grandfather and my grandparents, and it didn't come in 1950 for my parents, and it's not here in 2021, then what chance, what opportunity will my children have? Unless we make the change now, unless we take full responsibility for the policies that have dehumanized us and were meant to kill us, until we take a hard look at why our society is unloving to us and why we continue to wait and be silent. Join our voices together, family, because now, if not now, then when? Life on the checkerboard. The Jim running wolf of the following antidote is fictional, but his problem is not. He was invented by Oklahoma Indian writer Ruth Muskrat Bronson to dramatize the consequences of land allotment. A fatal weakness in the concept was its assumption that Indians were dying out. Instead, their numbers gradually picked up after 1910. How the original 160-acre allotments were supposed to support successive generations of Indian children was a question the Dawes allotment never addressed. As Bronson illustrates in this sketch from Indians Are People Too, the parcels soon became so diced up among the descendants that no single heir could possibly sustain a family. With some allotments sold and others retained in Indian hands, a checkerboard of Indian land ownership became reality. A non-Indian with enough money and know-how could lease adjoining squares from Indians to create a big, promising cattle operation, a practice on many reservations today. Excuse me, family. Jim Running Wolf is typical of much of the Indian population. He doesn't know how to farm. His people were hunters, but he sits on his allotment wishing someone would come along and show him what to do. The Indian agent comes along. "You are not using your land," he says to Jim. "Why don't you let me lease it for you, so that the white farmer who was looking at it the other day can use it?" All right with Jim. The government has always insisted it knew best anyways. So Jim Running Wolf and many others like him become petty landlords living in idleness on an annual rent barely sufficient to hold off starvation. Never enough to lift the shadow of malnutrition from their households. Then there is the problem of heirship. When Jim Running Wolf dies, there will be 4 daughters and 1 son to inherit his 160 acres. No one of his 5 heirs has enough money to buy out the other 4. The usual way a white family handles such a situation is for the family members who want to keep the farm to mortgage the land for enough to buy out the other heirs. The Running Wolf heirs can't do this, for the land cannot be sold because Jim Running Wolf is a ward. So in the absence of a will, the only thing to do would be to partition his land among his 5 heirs. In a country ill adapted to agriculture, 35 acres are not worth much money. So the land will probably not be partitioned. Instead, the government will go on leasing the land, dividing the lease money among the heirs down through the generations. There are pieces of land on the books of the Indian office so divided among the heirs that the annual lease income therefrom to any one heir is less than 1 cent. Yet the annual cost to the government to administer the estate is estimated at approximately 50 times as much as the annual lease the heir receives. I would like for you to reflect on that, family. Although it was a fictional narrative, it tells a very real story of how the Dawes Allotment Act, before the US government reversed its policy, affected millions of our Native and Indigenous people today. I would like for you to think, family, to your Indigenous brothers and sisters that are scattered across the United States. The some 572 federal recognized and hundreds more state recognized. How many of them still hold their traditional lands? How many of them still hold the original reservations that the US government kidnapped and forced imprisoned them on? I'm asking you, family, how many of us know a brother or sister or non-binary sibling who receives a check for revenue and it's in $8? I can think of 2 brothers and sisters right now. I'm asking, but it's also comical in a tragic fashion, family, because the way the Dawes Allotment Act worked, it divested Indigenous families of wealth that built the security and safety that white families enjoy today. The wealth of our households is in our house, family. And if you have no ability to buy a house, no equity to get into that class status, then you literally have no nest egg. You have no support system, family. And that is why thousands of our families who have been marginalized throughout our decades continue to live in poverty. It is not our fault. This is historically constructed, it is legally constructed, and history affects us all. I'm going to take us to our second reading, family. This is on page 313, reading number 2, Neglect Among the Klamath. And amidst a global pandemic, do not forget, family, that we are very privileged in the United States to have access to this life-saving vaccine for COVID, that many countries, due to socio-political reasons, will not have access to this life-saving vaccine for potentially years. Capitalist America holds the reins on the patents, which means that if you are an African country that cannot afford Pfizer or Moderna from the source, you're literally going to have to couple with another country to come up with your own original vaccine. In the spring of 1926, Robert Spot, a Yukon Indian from Northern California, addressed the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco. On Spot's mind were the straits of fellow Yurok along the Klamath River, whom he describes here as almost at the end of the road. Spot was honored by the French government for bravery during World War I. Afterwards, he apprenticed with the Californian anthropologist Alfred L. Kober. Eventually, they collaborated on a publication of Yurok oral traditions. Kober himself was among the Committee of 100, which in 1923 documented the same sort of neglect covered by Spot in his talk. Robert Spot. I did make up my mind in the war that I am American, and I went overseas to fight for this country. When the officers came to me while I was overseas, they told me, "You're all right. You fought for this country." I just gave them a smile and I thought to myself, where is my country when I go home? There are many Indian women that are almost blind and they have only one meal a day. Because there is no one to look after them, most of these people used to live on fish, which they cannot get, and on acorns, and now they are starving. They hardly have any clothing to cover them. Many children up along the Klamath have passed away with disease. Most of them from tuberculosis. There is no road into where the Indians are. The only road they have got is the Klamath River. To reach doctors, they have to take their children down the Klamath River to the mouth. It is 24 miles to Crescent City, where they have to go for doctors. It costs $25. Where are the poor Indians to get this money to get a doctor for their children? They go from place to borrow the money. If they cannot get it, the poor child dies without aid. Inside of 4 or 5 years more, there will be hardly any Indians left on the Klamath River. I came here to notify you that something has to be done. We must have a doctor, and we must have a school to educate our children, and we must have a road up the Klamath River besides the bank. Every creek in the wintertime goes into the river, and when the river is high, you only have a little path. And you cannot go behind the white man's homestead. We have to go someplace else. Whenever the river is low, we go back to plant a little, and we get maybe a bucket of beans. But you know very well we cannot live on the little land that we have. My father was an Indian chief, and we used to own everything there. When the land was allotted, they allotted him only 10 acres. A little farm of land which is mostly gravel and rock with little scrubby trees and redwood. My father was not satisfied with the land, and he said, "We owned this land. We ought to pick what we want." Well, the surveyor said, "You cannot do that because it is already taken up by homesteaders. I will tell you what I will do. I will have furnished you a plow and also a cow and a horse and everything that you can to improve your land." Then, of course, my father said, "All right, I am satisfied with that." Well, we are still waiting. My father passed away when he was 90 years old. I am his son, and I am waiting for it right now. If I ever will get the cows or the horses or the plow, I don't know. So I am here to tell you how we are standing up along the Klamath River. Often we see a car go past. It is Indian service. Do you suppose the man driving the car would stop? Always he has no time for the Indians, and the car with someone from the U.S. Indian Service goes past like a tourist. When he does come to his office, maybe he wants even an Indian woman to give up her allotment, to put up a better house for the government. A government house, we will call it, to help us. You will have a man to help the Indians out. The poor Indian woman says, "All right, I will let you have it." The man only stops there for 4 days and then he leaves. Whenever he comes there, just the minute he sees an Indian coming, he meets them by the door and says, "I've got business to do. I have not got any time for you." That is a somber note to leave you on, family. I would like for you to do some critical reflection. I would like for you to think hard about what we have heard today. And I want you to understand that these stories represent our lived experiences of our ancestors and the struggles that they faced when they were fighting for our ability to be alive today. I'm asking you, family, as a spiritual person who firmly believes that the energy, the intention, the work, and what I do in this world has a reflection on myself. When I put out good in the world, good comes back to me, family. When I let the negativity and the hate shadow this coyote, it makes the daily struggle for our survival that much more difficult. So I'm asking you, family, to grow with me, to think about your current situation, your current lived reality, and what we as individuals who are powerful in our own right, who are mothers and fathers and aunties and uncles, community leaders, teachers, educators, nurses, doctors, Uber drivers, we are the world. And our intention, our thought, our voice, and our action does make a difference to every single person around us. This is your spiritual leader, Dre Abeita, pastor of Coyotes Lodge, House of Spirituality, Critical Theory, and Medical Marijuana. Have a wonderful Sunday, family, and may all of your loved ones continue to enjoy safety, security, love. And let's be honest, family, you are a superhero. Thank you for everything you do.